Hi, this is a Hometown Sports Special. I'm John Cerruto, and welcome to the Coach's Corner. Today's subject, Mark McLaughlin. He has a vocation and avocation that are intertwined. His vocation, that of a neurosurgeon. His avocation, a wrestling coach. Let's go meet Mark McLaughlin. Well, Dr. Mark McLaughlin, welcome to the Coach's Corner.
Delighted to be here, John.
You know, Mark, we talk about the similarities between being a neurosurgeon and some of your background as an athlete. You know, how did you get involved with sports?
Well, I've always been interested in athletics. My two older brothers were athletes, and they got me into wrestling very early in my life.
And you got involved in what type of wrestling? Recreation wrestling?
I began wrestling with the Milburn Midgets under the tutelage of you and Bruce Barkhorn and Kevin Heinley. It was a fantastic experience, and athletics have taught me so many things in life. I'm a true believer that athletics teach three major life leadership skills: adaptability, focus, and determination.
Now, Mark, you go on to Pengree. Of course, you set all sorts of records over at Pengree. You have tremendous success. That carries on to the college at William & Mary. And, you know, you go on and enter medical school. And how did your athletic career or that foundation prepare you for the obstacles that you were going to be facing in medical school and beyond?
Well, it was the three lessons that you taught me. Focus, first of all, is absolutely important. And what I mean by that is a child, a youth, really needs to learn how to focus like a laser beam on one project and to eliminate distractions. It's a critical skill to have, and it's very important both in sports and even more important in medicine. Perfect example, Pilot Scully, as he landed his plane on the Hudson River. I mean, people asked him, were you scared? Were you worried about your life? He said, no. I focused on the task at hand. I eliminated every other distraction away from me, and I focused on what needed to get done. And that's absolutely true in medicine as well. When I'm operating, I have to have no distractions. I have to be totally focused on that one task at hand.
You know, Mark, today you're the head coach of a very successful recreation program down at Princeton, the Princeton Paws. Tell us something about the Princeton Paws.
Well, it's a program I took over about 7 years ago from the head coach at Princeton Wrestling at that time, which was Mike New. And it's been fantastic. It was a piece of the puzzle in my life that I needed to get back to. I've had 3 of my boys have wrestled there, 2 are still wrestling, and it's just been a fantastic experience. I try to teach them all the life skills that you taught me along the way, particularly with determination. Determination is so key, as we talked about before. It overrides talent every day of the week. Kids need to learn that what you put into an activity is what you get out of an activity, and success is directly proportional to the amount of determination that you put into this. And wrestling is the crucible of learning that skill. It's absolutely critical that kids can see that when they do their push-ups, when they do their sit-ups, when they drill and they get to practice. We talk about getting to practice early, like we talked about years ago. It's absolutely critical for these kids to realize that that is the key to success.
Well, you know, Mark, speaking about working with the youth, there's really 2 questions I want to ask you as a youth coach. First of all, how far can you push a young 14, 13, 12-year-old athlete? Where's that balance?
It's a good question, and every athlete, I think, has a different level. And as a coach, you need to see which kids can tolerate a little bit more stress and which kids can't. What we talk about is a safe challenge. You have to present the youth with a safe challenge, something that's a reach for them, that they are not sure whether they can do it or not, and they face that challenge and then they overcome it. And some kids, have more determination and more mental toughness than others, but you can still cultivate that. It's a skill that definitely can be learned.
Well, how about the association between athletics and education? Some people just aren't gifted athletically, and yet they want to probably expand upon their experiences growing up. Are athletics open to everybody?
Athletics are definitely open to everybody, and I can't underscore the fact that academics are critical too. We focus with all of our athletes. They have to be scholar athletes. They have to do their very best in school. I tell my kids I want them sitting in the front row of the classroom. I want to see their report cards. I want their teachers to know who they are. We give tickets out so kids can tell their teachers to come to the wrestling matches so they can see their kids wrestling. And it's absolutely important that they realize that any activity that they do, they need to do to their utmost ability and put their best effort in. That's what's critical.
Yeah, and Mark, tell us a little bit about the experience of wrestling on the collegiate level. You wrestled for the College of William & Mary. You had tremendous success. You're in the William & Mary Hall of Fame. You're in the Pingree Hall of Fame. You know, what outside of the great individual accomplishments, what other messages can you give to the high school student who might be watching this, who wants to go on and play college sports?
What I would say is constant improvement. That's what's the key. In other words, you may not always feel progress in terms of the accolades that you achieve on a yearly basis, but you have to feel that you're continually improving yourself. You've got better at your fireman's carry. You got better at whatever move you've been trying to perfect. You maybe lost to the same guy, but you lost to him at a shorter margin, a smaller margin. All those things need to come out with a constant improvement. That's the most important thing. And so each year you know that you're getting better and better. And that's sort of what I felt with my career, is that I became a better wrestler every single year that I progressed, all the way to the end. And I loved wrestling up until the very last match that I had. At the very end, I was sad that I wouldn't be wrestling anymore, but I knew that I had put my best foot forward.
Well, you know, Mark, we talk a lot about pressure, and the word pressure. Is pressure a good or bad thing in athletics?
Pressure is an excellent stressor for kids, and that leads me to my third lesson that I talk about, and that's adaptability. Kids need to learn how to refocus and redirect their efforts when the strategic plan that they've set out is not working. We've all seen setbacks. We've all had changes in the middle of a game or a match. And kids need to learn that you need to rapidly address what's going wrong. You need to refocus your efforts and get back into the game. And that happens in the operating room all the time. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of training going in there. We have a team. I have the nurses. I have the circulator. I have a number of other people. They all need to know what the goal is. And along the way, even though we're prepared for everything, we have to expect the unexpected. Something can go wrong, and you need to be ready for that. And athletics prepared me for that event in the operating room.
Well, whether you're doing an operation in life, Mark, or maybe even something as trite as we call trite versus an operating room, a speech, people often hear, especially in the athletic arena, that little voice in their head. And I know that you wrote a little article recently, and that was published in the Wrestling News, about the battle between the negative voice and the positive action. Can you share some of that?
Sure. It actually came from a speech that I gave to my wrestlers. And what had happened was I was doing a very difficult operation on a patient years ago. What happened was I was just about to start getting around this very difficult tumor that was stuck to the spinal cord, the upper portion of the spinal cord. And, you know, this person that I knew this person, they came with some mild deficits in their arm and their leg. And as I was about to do the most critical part of the operation, it just dawned on me for just an instant, my gosh, if something goes wrong here, this person will be paralyzed. And so I started hearing a little voice in my head. And I think everybody hears voices in their head. And this one said, maybe you're not up to snuff to do this operation. And of course, the other voice in my head said, yes, you can do this. You've trained your whole life to do this. Get with it. Break it down into steps. And the focus that I've said to my kids is whenever you're about to face a very complex task you need to break it down into simple steps. Get back to the basics. And what I did was I sort of coached myself into getting around the tumor, shrinking the tumor, and removing the tumor. And I kept saying that positive voice over and over in my head. And that's what I teach my wrestlers to do as well. Listen to the positive voices. Shut out the negative voices. You know, I tell them they got an iPod, put those positive earphones in. Listen to the positive voices that your coaches tell you. And that is what gets you to success.
Oh, that's great stuff, Mark. And I have to tell you, so tell me about the individual who goes about a task. And let's take wrestling because that's what we're talking about as coaches. enters the mat, he's working week in, week out in practice, and he's just not succeeding out there, and he gets discouraged. How do you, as a coach or a mentor, work him through that adversity, that he doesn't get so discouraged that he quits or just believes that he's always going to lose?
You have to point out to kids, all the great successful people in society have failed. Life without risk is not worth living. I mean, look, Michael Jordan was cut from his basketball team. Abe Lincoln lost 8 elections before he became a successful politician. And I just talked to them about how you have to put everything into perspective. And if you're not, succeeding in the win-loss column, you've got to break it down to say, well, I'm succeeding in that I'm better on my feet than I ever was, or I'm better on the field or faster than I was, or I'm stronger than I was. And if you get those little successes, that's the key. I always tell my kids, wrestling is like brain surgery. And they say, well, what do you mean by that? I say, well, I have to put on a uniform, I go to a locker room, I have to scout out an opponent, whether it's that patient's disease or a disc or a brain tumor or something. I have to plan an attack, and I walk into a hallowed ground, and I have to perform. And for me, every operation is like a playoff game. It's the greatest award that I can get. Years ago, it used to be trophies and medals, and now it's walking out of the operating room knowing that I made somebody well again, going out to comfort that family and telling them that everything went well, and feeling like it's the greatest award I could possibly get. It's the Olympics, period.
Well, that being said, you now have a team of physicians that you work with. And just knowing your mindset, being a coach, a lot of those guys aren't involved in coaching. Maybe they weren't athletic. Do you find that you have to be a coach also at work at times?
Those leadership skills that I learned long ago apply in everything that I do. And I have been able to assemble a team, and it's very hard. Like you said, you have to train people to all pull in the same direction. And while they don't have the same athletic background that I have, all of them have some certain activity that they have pursued to excellence, and they have a very similar mindset. And it's very important, not just the doctors, but the staff, the nurses, the physician's assistants, the front office. The entire team that I have at Princeton Brain and Spine Care are a group of people that are dedicated to excellence, that are continuing to improve themselves, that when they do have setbacks, they fight back and they learn from that setback and they recover and make themselves a better person, and they pursue excellence. And that's what we do at Princeton Brain and Spine Care.
Mark, you're from the area, and of course our viewing audience, you grew up in Short Hills, went to Pingree. Some people in your life at Pingree that influenced you and some of the experiences you had there. Can you share with us?
Well, I've been so blessed to have so many great coaches and teachers along the way. And I've taken lessons from every one of them. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think of one of my coaches or one of my teachers. And my promise to all of them is that I will pass their lessons on. You can learn so many different things from different people. I was lucky. I actually had 3 different coaches in high school. Some people would say that's a lot. That probably is inconsistent. But for me, it was excellent because I took each of the great skills that those 3 coaches taught me. Bill Russell, Peter Aringer, and Joe Ford. And each of them had different skill sets, and I was able to incorporate them and embed them into my practices.
Well, I have to tell you, that's very consistent with our last guest on Coach's Corner, Coach Jerry Saxel, who you also know, and we talked about multiple sports and the influence of being under a number of different coaches. What are your feelings about multiple sport athletes?
Well, I love that interview with Coach Saxel, and he is one of those people I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And I loved his answer about what a coach's role is. And I completely agree with it. It's a sounding board, it's an advisor. And just to sort of amplify on that concept, I kind of look at a coach as a coach's job is to teach a child how to play poker. When I was a kid, I played poker with my grandfather all the time. And as you know, you can get a good hand or you can get a bad hand. But you can win with either of those hands if you play your cards right. Some kids get great hands. They have natural ability, they have athletic talent, they have athleticism or competitiveness. And other kids get dealt not so great hands. Sometimes they have bad family genes, alcoholism, depression. Sometimes they have poor support systems or learning disabilities. But what you got to do is you got to teach your kids to play that hand as best as they can. You have to stand over their shoulder and say, I wouldn't play that card, I would get rid of that card. Or, that's your strong suit. Play that suit and run it as far as you can. And that's really what a coach's role is.
Well, you know, similar to Coach Saxo, we also talked about having children and then becoming a coach. And I know that you've had to coach a couple of your own boys coming through the program. I'm sure there are both positives and negatives to something like that. How about to the individual out there who's maybe coaching Little League or other youth sports, and he has his daughter or son on his team and he's coaching him? What type of advice can you give?
Keep perspective more than anything. And just to get back, I do believe in the multiple sports concept. It's very important for a kid to have different groups of friends, to have different coaches, and to learn different skills. And again, I think that's one of the reasons why I had a love for wrestling all the way through college, is because I played football and I played lacrosse. And I had different skill sets learned with friends and with coaches. But as a parent coaching a child, the most important thing is keeping perspective, understanding that it's a youth sport. I try and infuse humor as much as I can. One time I had one of the little kids thinking he had a little microphone in his headgear, and I said, you haven't been hearing me? I'm telling you things with my dictaphone, and you should be hearing them out on the mat. And he's looking at his headgear, and I said, no, I'm just kidding. But it's really important to infuse humor into it, to get the parents to realize that you just want to have your child have a good experience. That's the one anxiety point that I have when my kids go out on the mat. I want them to, I know they may not win all the time, but I want them to have a good experience. And I want them to realize that it's a learning experience and process all along the way.
Tough question. As a neurosurgeon, as far as risk of injury in sports, what concerns you the most? What part of the body?
Well, neck injuries are obviously one of the scariest things, and also concussions, which we deal with a lot. The most important thing, if I could tell parents to avoid these kinds of injuries, is one, a very well-prepared, well-trained athlete. It's critical. Warm-ups are absolutely critical, so the kids get stretched out and their blood is flowing through all their muscles, and their reactivity and their ability to see peripheral vision is all keyed in. And then most importantly is just prevention of minor injuries, or addressing minor injuries as they come about. Early identification is absolutely key. So those are the things I would tell parents to do. Keep an eye out for things, make sure your kids warm up, and make sure they're absolutely fit for their activity. And that's where calisthenics come in, that's where drilling comes in, and proper preparation for competition.
You know, Mark, we talked about how athletics influenced you towards a determination, a discipline, a focus, and a drive. Who influenced you to get into medicine? Was it something you always wanted to do, or were there other options?
Well, my grandfather was the first influence. You know, I'm a third-generation physician, and I used to go on house calls with my grandfather at the age of 5, and I wanted to be just like him. So it was really fantastic as things went on that I continued this interest and just built on it to the point where when I was in college I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and moved on to medical school and residency. I subsequently have had uncles who have helped me out along the way, taken me to the operating room, and fortunately the one thing that I wanted to do when I was 5 years old, I got to do now. And I'm absolutely living my dream. I'm the happiest I've ever been. I love taking care of people. I love looking at surgery like it's a competition, as it was in wrestling, now as an athletic contest that I have to perform. When I take people to the operating room, it's the most important day of their life. And before that operation, I understand that that person is a loved father or a mother. They're a valued person in the community, and I have to have that human touch. But when I bring them to the operating room, I have to focus on this matter at hand. I have to go through step by step, achieve the task, achieve the goals. And then when I'm done, I've got to come back and get that human touch back and go out and talk with the family. And I just love molding that athletic performance competition with the medicine.
So obviously you must have excelled academically, and it was probably through determination also. You and I have also talked off camera, Mark. How many times have we seen maybe a physically inferior opponent beat the superior looking opponent? And where does that come from?
It is truly determination. I mean, I've always said to people, I'm not the smartest guy, but I'll outwork anybody. And that's really the key. The key is that you realize that if you focus hard enough on something and you put enough hours in, you can truly overcome anything. And it's just grit, and it can be learned, it can be taught. You instilled it in so many wrestlers and so many of the athletes that you have coached.
Well, you know, Dr. Mark McLaughlin, I will tell you, we've talked a lot about our philosophies and your strategies in implementation of making people better. But let's talk a little bit about your wrestling career, because it was quite successful. You went to Pingree, and you're an undefeated wrestler at Pingree. Tell us about some of the awards that you did win up there.
Well, I was a New Jersey State Prep champion. I was an honorable mention All-American. Went on to William & Mary. I was a captain there. Had 16 pins my senior year. Won the Virginia State Championship. Was outstanding wrestler. My team won the championship, which was the greatest experience. And went on to the EIWAs and won the EIWA championships, which is one of the accomplishments I'm most proud of, because there were so many great wrestlers that came through the EIWA. And there were so many fantastic teams that were there. Lehigh, Syracuse, Princeton, Army, Navy. That's really a coveted title that I'm very, very proud of. And something that took a lot of time and preparation. And I had some setbacks. I had some injuries along the way. I remember my last year training for the EIWAs, I went out for a run. And when I was running, I felt like I was going to have to stop. And somehow in my mind, again, that voice came in and said, if you stop, you're not going to win the EIWAs. I don't know, it was just this little thing in my head. And I said, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to finish this run. I will not stop running. And I was so hot, and I just kept taking layer after layer off. And in the middle of winter in Williamsburg, and I'm running, and I run up to the hall, the William & Mary Hall. All I've got on was my gym shorts on. I hope thank goodness I didn't have to run any farther. I was totally stripped down, and I made it to the top, and I said, I know it. You're going to win it. You're going to win the EIWAs. And it was just that little voice that, again, I had to push down and say, you can do this. And that's the kind of voice we want to instill in our youth athletes.
Well, it also goes back to what you said previously in this interview about those successes. You never know where you're going to measure the success that's going to bring you to the bigger success. That
Exactly.
accomplishment gave you the confidence to move forward with it. Last two questions, short answers. Most proud athletic accomplishment?
Would have to be the EIWA championships for myself as an individual. But as a team, it was great to see my team win the Virginia State Championships. It was an entire team effort. Everybody wrestled above their potential, beat people that had beaten them earlier in the year, and it was one of those days when everything came together. We peaked at the right time.
And professionally?
Professionally is my relationship with my Russian colleagues. I created a relationship with some Russian neurosurgeons in St. Petersburg back in 1997, which culminated in 2 symposiums, one in 2000 and one in 2005, where I brought a team of surgeons over there to train Russian neurosurgeons in spine and brain surgery. It's been a fantastic experience with wonderful people, teaching them how to do new techniques. And I plan on doing another trip probably in 2010.
Well, Dr. Mark McLaughlin, this has been wonderful, and I will tell you that you are an example of somebody who has learned the lessons moving through life with sports and academics and family and all the wonderful good things, and you are sharing them with so many people. We thank you for being on Coach's Corner, Mark, and
Thank you
you have to
very
come back
much.
sometime.